The millionaire laughed at her idea until the maid saved his $1 million project. Welcome to our channel, where extraordinary stories unfold in the most unexpected places. Before we dive into today's incredible tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single story. And hey, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're listening from. Are you tuning in from New York, maybe São Paulo, or perhaps somewhere completely different? We love connecting with our global family. Today's story will absolutely blow your mind. It's about Maria Santos, a humble cleaning lady from El Paso, Texas, whose brilliant idea was dismissed by a millionaire tech CEO until that same idea became the key to saving his empire. Get comfortable, because this 35-minute journey will show you that genius can come from the most unexpected places. So, where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments, and let's begin this amazing story together. Chapter 1. The Invisible Woman. The 40-story glass tower of Harrison Tech Industries pierced the Dallas skyline like a crystal spear, reflecting the morning sun across the bustling downtown district. Inside the gleaming lobby, where marble floors sparkled under designer chandeliers, Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive elevators, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the polished stone. At 52, Maria had been cleaning these floors for 8 years. Every morning at 5 a.m., she arrived to prepare the building before the executives began their day. She knew every corner, every office, every secret that these walls held. Yet to most people who passed her in their expensive suits, she was invisible, just another piece of the building's infrastructure. "Hold that elevator," called a sharp voice. Maria quickly pressed the button as James Harrison III strode into the elevator, his 6-foot frame commanding attention even in the confined space. The 38-year-old CEO of Harrison Tech had inherited the company from his father, transforming it from a small software firm into a billion-dollar empire specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. "Thank you," he said curtly, not looking at Maria as he adjusted his Italian tie and checked his Rolex. His mind was clearly elsewhere, probably on the board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. As the elevator climbed toward the 40th floor, Maria couldn't help but notice the stress lines around James's eyes, the way his jaw clenched as he scrolled through messages on his phone. She had observed him for years, the late nights, the frustrated phone calls, the growing tension that seemed to consume him lately. The elevator dinged softly as they reached the executive floor. James stepped out without acknowledgement, his leather shoes clicking against the hardwood as he headed toward his corner office. Maria watched him go, then continued to the 39th floor where she began her morning routine. An hour later, as Maria cleaned the conference room adjacent to James's office, she couldn't help but overhear the heated discussion taking place behind the thin walls. "James, we're hemorrhaging money," came the voice of Robert Chen, the chief financial officer. "The AI project has consumed $47 million over 2 years, and we still don't have a viable product." "The Tokyo investors are getting nervous," added Sarah Williams, the head of international relations. "They're threatening to pull out if we don't show concrete results by month's end." Maria paused in her dusting, recognizing the desperation in James's voice as he responded. "This project will revolutionize personal AI assistance. We just need more time to perfect the user interface. The technology is sound." "Sound technology means nothing if people can't use it," Robert shot back. "The beta testers are saying it's too complicated, too impersonal. We're competing against companies that make AI feel human and accessible." Through the glass wall, Maria could see James running his hands through his dark hair, his usually perfect appearance showing cracks. She had seen this pattern before in her previous job at a failing restaurant in El Paso. The owner had the best recipes in town, but customers stopped coming because they felt unwelcome, unheard. "What if we made it simpler?" James said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Streamlined the interface." "It's not about simplicity," Sarah argued. "It's about connection. People want to feel understood, not just processed." As the meeting ended and the executives filed out, Maria continued cleaning but her mind was racing. She thought about her own life, raising 3 children as a single mother, working multiple jobs, always finding ways to stretch every dollar, every moment. She thought about real problems, real needs, Real solutions that came not from boardrooms, but from necessity. That evening, as Maria rode the bus home to her small apartment in East Dallas, she found herself sketching ideas on the back of a grocery receipt. What if the AI could understand not just what people said, but what they really meant? What if it could recognize the difference between "I'm fine," said with a smile, and "I'm fine," said with exhaustion? Her youngest daughter, Sophia, found her at the kitchen table at midnight, still scribbling notes. "Mama, what are you working on?" the 15-year-old asked, settling beside her mother. "I'm just thinking, mija," Maria said, showing her daughter the receipt covered in Spanish and English notes. "You know how sometimes you tell me you're okay, but I know you're not because of how you say it, how you look." Sophia nodded. "Yeah, like when I said I was fine about not going to the dance, but you knew I was disappointed." "Exactly. What if computers could do that too? What if they could understand feelings, not just words?" Sophia's eyes lit up with the same intensity Maria had inherited. "That would be amazing, Mama. Like having a friend who really gets you." As Maria tucked her daughter into bed, she realized she had stumbled onto something important. But she was just a cleaning lady. Who would listen to her? The next morning, Maria arrived at Harrison Tech with a decision burning in her chest. She would find a way to share her idea, even if it meant risking the job that kept her family fed and housed. Sometimes, she had learned from years of struggle, you had to bet everything on what you believed in. The glass tower stood before her once again, but this time, Maria Santos didn't feel invisible. She felt like she was carrying a key that could unlock doors no one else had even noticed. Chapter 2. The Courage to Speak. The executive floor buzzed with nervous energy as Maria pushed her cart down the familiar hallway. Through the glass walls, she could see James Harrison pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing frantically. The dark circles under his eyes had deepened since yesterday, and his usually immaculate suit looked wrinkled, as if he'd slept in his office again. "Sir, I understand your concerns," James was saying into the phone, his voice strained. "But pulling your investment now would be premature. We're on the verge of a breakthrough." Maria knew from years of overheard conversations that this was probably Hiroshi Tanaka, the lead investor from Tokyo. The Japanese businessman had visited the office 3 times in the past month, each visit leaving James more anxious than the last. As she cleaned the conference room, Maria noticed scattered papers on the table, user feedback forms that painted a bleak picture of the current AI prototype. Comments like, "feels robotic," "doesn't understand context," and "lacks emotional intelligence" were highlighted in red ink. That afternoon, during her lunch break, Maria sat in the building's small employee break room, sharing a table with Gladys Washington, a security guard who had become her closest friend at Harrison Tech. "You've been different lately, hon," Gladys observed, unwrapping her sandwich. "Got that look in your eyes like when my grandson figured out how to fix his bicycle." Maria smiled at the comparison. "Gladys, you ever have an idea that just won't let you sleep?" "Oh, honey, I've had plenty of those. Most of them involved telling my ex-husband exactly what I thought of his gambling habits." Gladys chuckled, then grew serious. "But you're talking about something else, aren't you?" Maria pulled out her notebook, no longer just a grocery receipt, but a small journal filled with detailed observations and ideas. "I think I know how to fix Mr. Harrison's AI problem." Gladys nearly choked on her coffee. "Come again." "I've been listening, watching. The problem isn't the technology, it's that they're trying to make it perfect instead of making it human." Maria's voice grew more confident as she explained her idea about emotional recognition and contextual understanding. "Maria, that's actually brilliant," Gladys said slowly. "Sas, but honey, how are you going to get a billionaire to listen to a cleaning lady?" That question haunted Maria for the rest of the afternoon. As she cleaned James's office later that day, she noticed he had left his computer screen open to an email from his father, James Harrison Jr., the company's founder who had retired to Florida. "Son," the email read, "remember what I always taught you. The best ideas often come from the people closest to the problem. Don't let pride blind you to wisdom, wherever it may come from." Maria quickly looked away, not wanting to invade his privacy further, but the words echoed in her mind. Maybe there was a way. The next morning, Maria arrived at work 30 minutes early. She had spent the entire night refining her presentation, writing it out in simple terms that anyone could understand. Her hands shook slightly as she approached James's office door. Through the glass, she could see him staring at his computer screen, probably reading more bad news about the project. She knocked softly. "Come in," James called without looking up. Maria entered, her cleaning cart left outside. "Mr. Harrison, sir. I'm sorry to bother you, but I have something I think might help with your AI project." James finally looked up, confusion crossing his features as he tried to place her. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" "I'm Maria Santos. I've been cleaning your office for 8 years. She took a deep breath. "I know this might sound crazy, but I've been thinking about your AI problem, and I might have a solution." James blinked, clearly taken aback. "I'm sorry. Did you say you have a solution to our AI development issues?" "Yes, sir. If you could just give me 5 minutes." James's phone rang, interrupting her. He held up a finger and answered. "Harrison." "What?" "They're pulling out entirely." "No, there has to be something we can do." "I see. Thank you for calling." He hung up and put his head in his hands. When he looked up at Maria, his expression had hardened. "Ms. Santos, was it? I appreciate your concern, but I've just lost a $12 million contract because our AI can't connect with users emotionally. I don't think a cleaning lady is going to solve problems that our MIT-educated engineers haven't been able to crack." The dismissal stung, but Maria had expected it. "Mr. Harrison, with respect, maybe that's exactly the problem. You've got brilliant people thinking like brilliant people, but your users aren't all brilliant people. They're regular folks like me." James laughed, but there was no humor in it, only exhaustion and frustration. "Regular folks like you, Maria. Do you have any idea how complex artificial intelligence algorithms are? The neural networks, the machine learning protocols, the natural language processing?" "No, sir. I don't know about any of that. But I know about people." Maria stood her ground. "I know that when my daughter says she's fine but her voice is flat, she's not fine. I know that when you say good morning but don't make eye contact, you're stressed about something. I know that humans communicate with more than just words." "That's a nice observation," James said, his tone patronizing. "But building emotional recognition into AI requires sophisticated sentiment analysis, facial recognition technology, voice pattern analysis." "What if it didn't have to be that complicated?" Maria interrupted, her voice growing stronger. "What if the AI could learn to recognize patterns the way a mother learns to understand her children, not through complex algorithms, but through simple observation and response?" James stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head with another bitter laugh. "Maria, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're talking about revolutionary changes to our entire approach. And frankly, I don't have time for amateur psychology when I'm facing the biggest crisis of my career." He gestured toward the door. "If you'll excuse me, I have investors to call and damage control to manage." Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "Mr. Harrison, I wrote down my ideas. Just, if you ever have a moment, maybe you could look at them." James barely glanced at the paper as she placed it on his desk. "Of course, thank you, Maria." As she left his office, Maria heard him mutter to himself, "A cleaning lady thinks she can save a $47 million AI project. If only it were that simple." Walking back to her cart, Maria felt the weight of defeat settling on her shoulders, but as she began cleaning the hallway, she reminded herself of something her grandmother used to say. "The seed that falls on rocky ground doesn't grow immediately, mija, but sometimes it finds a crack and surprises everyone." Maybe James Harrison wasn't ready to hear her ideas today, but Maria Santos hadn't survived 8 years of single motherhood and countless challenges by giving up after one rejection. The folded paper sat on James's desk, ignored among the pile of reports and contracts. But it was there, waiting for the right moment, the right crisis, the right crack in the rock where an unexpected seed might finally take root. Chapter 3. The Breakthrough Moment. 3 weeks had passed since Maria's awkward encounter with James Harrison. and the atmosphere at Harrison Tech had grown increasingly tense. The AI project, codenamed Aria, was hemorrhaging money and credibility with each passing day. Maria watched from her invisible vantage point as executives huddled in emergency meetings, their voices growing more desperate with each session. James looked terrible. His usually pristine appearance had deteriorated. His shirts were wrinkled, his tie often askew, and she'd noticed him sleeping in his office more frequently. The folded paper with Maria's ideas remained buried somewhere in the chaos of his desk, forgotten like yesterday's coffee cup. On a particularly stressful Tuesday morning, Maria was cleaning the conference room when she overheard a conference call that would change everything. "James, this is our final conversation," came the stern voice through the speakerphone. Maria recognized it as Hiroshi Tanaka, the Tokyo investor. "The board has voted. If you cannot demonstrate a working prototype that achieves an emotional connection rating above 70% by Friday, we're terminating our partnership and demanding immediate repayment of our $43 million investment." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the glass wall, Maria could see James's face go pale. "Hiroshi-san, please reconsider," James pleaded. "Thoisus, we've invested too much to abandon the project now." "Precisely the point, James-kun. We have invested too much in a project that shows no signs of connecting with real users. Your AI is technically proficient, but emotionally vacant. It's like speaking to a very smart refrigerator." After the call ended, Maria watched James slump in his chair, staring at the ceiling. She had seen that look before. It was the same expression her late husband had worn when the medical bills started piling up, and hope seemed to slip away with each passing day. That afternoon, as Maria cleaned James's office, she noticed he was frantically reviewing user feedback reports. Red ink covered nearly every page, with comments like, "feels artificial," "doesn't understand my mood," and "lacks empathy," appearing repeatedly. "This is impossible," James muttered to himself, throwing a report across his desk. "How do you teach a machine to understand human emotions when half the time humans don't understand their own emotions?" Maria paused in her dusting. Almost without thinking, she said softly, "Maybe you're asking the wrong question, sir." James looked up, startled. He had forgotten she was there. "What did you say?" Maria felt her heart race, but something about his desperate expression gave her courage. "Maybe instead of asking how to teach a machine to understand emotions, you should ask how emotions work between real people." James stared at her. "Maria, right? Look, I appreciate your concern, but—" "Mr. Harrison?" Maria interrupted gently. "When your daughter calls you, how do you know if she's really okay or just saying she's okay?" The question caught James off guard. He thought of his own daughter, Emma, away at college. I listen to her tone, I guess. The way she pauses. If she's talking too fast or too slow." "Exactly," Maria said, moving closer to his desk. "You don't need to be a psychologist to know something's wrong. You just need to pay attention to the little things that don't match up." James found himself actually listening. "What do you mean?" "Well, like yesterday, you told Miss Williams, everything's fine, when she asked about the project, but your voice was tight and you kept tapping your pen. The words said one thing, but everything else said another." James looked down at his hand. He was tapping his pen right now. "And you think an AI could learn to notice things like that?" "Why not? My youngest daughter, Sophia, she's 15, and she can tell when I'm worried about money even when I try to hide it. She noticed I buy the cheaper cereal when bills are due, or I hum louder when I'm stressed. If a 15-year-old can figure that out, maybe your computer can too." For the first time in weeks, James felt a flicker of genuine interest. That's actually not a bad concept. But how would you implement something like that? The technical challenges are enormous." Maria smiled. "Mr. Harrison, I don't know anything about the technical stuff, but I know that people want to feel understood, not analyzed." She gestured toward the user feedback scattered across his desk. "Look at these comments. They're not complaining about the AI being wrong. They're complaining about it being cold." James picked up one of the reports. User states, "When I told the AI I had a bad day, it offered efficiency tips for time management. I wanted it to acknowledge that I was feeling frustrated, maybe suggest I take a break or call a friend. See, Maria said. The AI heard bad day and thought productivity problem, but the person was really saying, I need some understanding and support. James was quiet for a long moment, studying the feedback with new eyes. How you're saying the AI needs to learn emotional context, not just linguistic patterns. I guess so, if that's what you call it. I just think it needs to learn the difference between what people say and what they need. Suddenly, James remembered something. Wait, didn't you try to talk to me about this before, a few weeks ago? Maria nodded, embarrassed. You were busy, sir, and you were right. I don't understand the technical side. But you understand the human side, James said slowly. He started digging through the papers on his desk. Where is that thing you gave me? The paper with your ideas? It took several minutes of searching, but James finally found Maria's folded notes, slightly coffee-stained and wrinkled. As he read through her observations, his expression changed from skepticism to surprise to growing excitement. Maria, these insights about emotional cues and contextual responses, this could work. He looked up at her with new respect. You've identified the exact problem our engineers have been trying to solve for months. Really? Maria asked, hardly daring to believe it. Really? James stood up, pacing with renewed energy. You're right. We've been approaching this backwards. Instead of trying to program emotions into the AI, we should teach it to recognize and respond to human emotional needs. He grabbed his phone and dialed, Robert, drop everything and get the development team together. I think I've found our breakthrough. No, I'll explain when you get here. Just trust me on this one. As James made more calls, assembling his team for an emergency meeting, Maria quietly returned to her cleaning, but this time she didn't feel invisible. For the first time in 8 years, someone at Harrison Tech was not just seeing her, they were truly listening to her. Maria, James called out as she reached the door, would you be willing to stay for the meeting? I think the team needs to hear your perspective. Maria's hand trembled slightly on her cleaning cart. Are you sure, Mr. Harrison? I'm sure, he said with conviction. Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. As Maria nodded and set aside her cart, she thought of her grandmother's words about seeds finding cracks in rocky ground. Maybe today was the day her seed would finally begin to grow. Chapter 4. The Collaboration. The Harrison Tech conference room had never seen anything like it. Around the polished mahogany table sat the company's top engineers and executives, Dr. Sarah Kim, lead AI developer with degrees from Stanford and MIT, Robert Chen, the CFO, Sarah Williams, head of international relations, and several other senior staff members. At the head of the table was James Harrison, looking more energized than he had in months. And sitting quietly near the corner, still wearing her cleaning uniform, was Maria Santos. I know this is unusual, James began, addressing the confused looks from his team, but Maria has identified something we've all been missing. Sarah, show them the latest user feedback statistics. Dr. Kim pulled up a presentation on the wall screen. User satisfaction with Aria is currently at 32%. The primary complaints center around the AI feeling impersonal, robotic, and unable to understand context. Right? James said. Now, Maria, would you mind sharing your observations about why this might be happening? Maria felt every eye in the room on her. These were some of the smartest people in tech, and she was about to tell them what they were doing wrong. Her heart pounded, but she thought of her children at home, of the struggles that had taught her to read people out of necessity. Well, Maria began, her voice barely above a whisper before growing stronger. I think the problem is that your AI is listening to words, but people communicate with much more than words. Dr. Kim frowned. Our natural language processing is incredibly sophisticated. We analyze syntax, semantics, pragmatic inference. But do you analyze feelings? Maria interrupted gently. When I clean these offices, I hear people all day. Yesterday, Mr. Chen told someone on the phone that the quarterly projections were fine, but his voice was tight and he kept rubbing his temples. The word was positive, but everything else told me he was stressed. Robert Chen looked surprised. You noticed that? I notice everything, Maria said simply. It's how I survive. When you're raising 3 kids on a cleaning lady's salary, you learn to read the warning signs in people's voices, their postures, their habits. James leaned forward. Tell them about the example with your daughter. Maria took a deep breath. My 15-year-old Sophia came home last week and said school was great, but she said it too quickly, didn't make eye contact, and went straight to her room without her usual snack. Her computer might have heard great and responded positively, but I knew something was wrong. It turned out she'd had a fight with her best friend. Fascinating, Dr. Kim said, her skepticism beginning to fade. You're talking about multimodal emotional recognition, analyzing not just linguistic content, but paralinguistic cues. I don't know what that means, Maria admitted, but I know that humans are complicated. We say one thing when we mean another, especially when we're hurt or scared or trying to protect someone else's feelings. Sarah Williams, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. That's exactly what the Tokyo investors complained about. They said Aria felt like talking to a very polite machine that never really understood what we needed. James stood and began pacing, his energy building. Maria, walk us through how a human would handle some of these user interactions differently. Maria thought for a moment. Okay, let's say someone tells the AI, I'm fine, when asked how their day was. Right now, Aria probably says something like, that's good to hear, and moves on, right? Dr. Kim nodded. Standard positive acknowledgement protocol. But what if the person's voice was flat? What if they paused too long before answering? What if it's 2 a.m. when they're asking? Maria's voice grew more confident. A real friend wouldn't just accept, I'm fine. They might say, are you sure? You sound tired, or want to talk about it, or even just, I'm here if you need anything. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. She's right, Robert said slowly. We've been building an AI that responds to what people say, not what they need. But how do we program that kind of intuitive understanding? Dr. Kim asked. Maria looked around the room, then smiled. Maybe you don't program it. Maybe you teach it. What do you mean? James asked. Well, how did I learn to read my children's emotions, not from a book or a manual? I watched them. I listened. I made mistakes. I learned from those mistakes. What if Aria could do the same thing? Dr. Kim's eyes widened. Machine learning based on emotional context patterns rather than just linguistic patterns. We could train the system to recognize inconsistencies between verbal content and emotional indicators. Exactly, Maria said, then paused. I mean, I think so. You're the expert on how to actually make it work. James felt a surge of excitement. This could work. Instead of trying to program every possible emotional scenario, we teach Aria to recognize patterns and respond with empathy rather than just efficiency. But we'd need extensive training data, Dr. Kim said, thousands of examples of emotional context and appropriate responses. Maria raised her hand tentatively. What if I helped with that? I mean, I've been observing people's emotional patterns for years. I could help identify the kinds of situations where Aria should respond differently. The room buzzed with sudden energy as the team began discussing implementation strategies, but James called for attention. Before we get carried away with the technical details, I want everyone to understand something. He looked directly at Maria. This breakthrough came from someone who doesn't have an engineering degree or an MBA. It came from someone who understands the fundamental truth we lost sight of. Technology should serve human needs, not the other way around. Dr. Kim, who had initially seemed most skeptical, now looked at Maria with genuine respect. Maria, would you be willing to work with our team as a consultant? Your insights into human emotional patterns could be invaluable. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. You want me to help build your AI? We want you to help us make it human, James said, because apparently that's something we forgot how to do. As the meeting continued late into the evening, Maria found herself at the center of discussions about emotional algorithms, response protocols, and user experience design. She didn't understand all the technical terms, but every time the conversation became too abstract, she brought it back to real human experiences, the way her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's voice changed when she was lonely, how her son Miguel's texting patterns shifted when he was stressed about school. By midnight, the team had outlined a completely new approach to Aria's development. Instead of a cold, efficient AI, they would create a warm, intuitive assistant that could recognize emotional subtext and respond with genuine understanding. "Maria," James said as the meeting finally wound down, "I owe you an apology. When you first tried to share these ideas, I dismissed them without even listening." Maria smiled. "Mr. Harrison, you were dealing with a lot of pressure. Besides, sometimes seeds need to wait for the right season to grow." "Well," James said, "I think the right season just arrived." As Maria finally gathered her things to leave, she realized that tomorrow she wouldn't just be coming to work as the invisible cleaning lady. She would be coming as a valued member of the team that might just save Harrison Tech's future. The folded paper that had sat ignored on James's desk for weeks was now spread out on the conference table, covered with notes and ideas from some of the brightest minds in technology. But at its heart were the simple, profound observations of a woman who had learned to see people not as they appeared to be, but as they truly were. Chapter 5. The Transformation. 6 weeks later, the same Dallas boardroom that had witnessed so much desperation now buzzed with cautious optimism. The wall screens displayed Aria 2.0's beta testing results, and for the first time in months, the numbers were promising. User satisfaction had jumped from 32% to 78%, and the emotional connection ratings that had seemed impossible to achieve were now consistently above the 70% threshold demanded by the Tokyo investors. Maria sat at the conference table wearing a new outfit, a professional blazer she had bought with her first consultant paycheck. The past month and a half had been a whirlwind of 18-hour days, working alongside Dr. Kim's team to implement what they now called contextual emotional intelligence, or CEI. "The user feedback speaks for itself," Dr. Kim announced, pulling up testimonials on the screen. "Say, listen to this one. Aria actually understood that when I said I was having trouble sleeping, I wasn't looking for sleep hygiene tips. I was worried about my mom's cancer diagnosis. Aria asked gentle questions, offered emotional support, and suggested I might want to call my mom or a friend. It felt like talking to someone who actually cared." James nodded with satisfaction, but his attention was focused on the phone in the center of the table. In 30 minutes, Hiroshi Tanaka and the Tokyo Investment Board would call for the final demonstration that would determine Harrison Tech's future. "Maria," James said, "I want you to conduct the demonstration." Maria's eyes widened. "Mr. Harrison, I think Dr. Kim should—" "No," James interrupted firmly. "This transformation happened because you understood what we were missing. You should be the one to show them what we've found." Robert Chen leaned forward. "So, the Tokyo investors specifically requested a demonstration of Aria's ability to handle complex emotional situations. They want to see how it responds to subtlety, implied needs, cultural sensitivity." Maria nodded, though her heart was racing. Over the past weeks, she had worked closely with Dr. Kim to develop what they called emotional scenarios, real-life situations where traditional AI would fail, but human intuition would succeed. They had programmed Aria not just with responses, but with the ability to recognize patterns Maria had spent decades learning to read. The phone rang precisely at 2 p.m. "Good afternoon, Tanaka-san," James said formally. "Thank you for taking the time for this demonstration." "Harrison-san," came the crisp voice from Tokyo. "I hope you understand the gravity of this call. Our board has been very patient, but patience has limits. You have promised revolutionary improvements to Aria. Are you prepared to deliver?" "Yes, sir. I'd like you to meet Maria Santos, our Director of Emotional Intelligence Integration." There was a pause from Tokyo. Maria had suggested the title, explaining that fancy words sometimes helped people take simple ideas seriously. "Ms. Santos," Hiroshi's voice carried polite curiosity, "I understand you are the architect of Aria's new emotional capabilities." "I helped identify what was missing, sir," Maria replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Aria was technically perfect, but it wasn't connecting with people as human beings. We've changed that." "Please proceed with the demonstration." Maria activated Aria on her computer. The interface had been redesigned to be more conversational, less clinical. Instead of rigid command prompts, Aria opened interactions with warm, natural greetings. "I'm going to show you 3 scenarios," Maria explained. "Each one represents the kind of real-world interaction where the old Aria struggled." For the first demonstration, Maria typed, "Aria, I just got home from work. Today was really tough." The old Aria would have responded with something like, "I'm sorry to hear you had difficulties at work. Would you like productivity tips for tomorrow?" Aria 2.0 responded, "That sounds exhausting. Do you want to talk about what made it so rough? Or would you prefer to do something to help you unwind first?" "Note the difference," Maria explained to the Tokyo investors. Aria recognized that tough day could mean the person needs emotional support, practical help, or just distraction. Instead of assuming, it asks what would be most helpful. Hiroshi's voice came through the speaker. Intrigued. "Continue." For the second scenario, Maria demonstrated Aria's ability to read emotional subtext. She typed, "Everything's fine, just checking in." Aria 2.0 responded, "I'm glad you checked in. Your message seems a little different from usual, though. If you want to talk about anything, I'm here. Or if you'd rather just chat about something light, that's fine too." "How did it know to respond that way?" asked another voice from Tokyo. Dr. Kim leaned toward the speakerphone. "We trained Aria to recognize patterns, message length, word choice, timing, even punctuation. In this case, the message was unusually short and formal compared to the user's typical communication style. Aria learned to gently probe instead of taking statements at face value. The third demonstration was the most complex. Maria had crafted a scenario based on her own experience as a working mother. She typed, "Aria, I'm supposed to be happy about my daughter's college acceptance, but I keep thinking about the tuition costs." Aria 2.0 responded, "Congratulations on your daughter's acceptance. That's a huge achievement for both of you. It makes complete sense that you'd have mixed feelings, Tammy, though. Being proud and worried about finances at the same time doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you human. Would it help to talk through some options, or do you need someone to just acknowledge how complicated this feels?" The Tokyo conference room fell silent. Finally, Hiroshi spoke, his voice carrying a note of amazement. "Ms. Santos," in that last response, Aria demonstrated empathy, validation, emotional intelligence, and offered appropriate support options. How is this possible?